I once talked to a Muslim friend about the Qur'an, the Sunnah and the Hadith. He told me that he only follows the Qur'an, but not the traditions of Muhammad. I asked him, "Are you sure? I hear this for the first time." He replied, "Only the Qur'an is Allah's word, but the Sunnah and the Hadith are man's words. You never know which of those traditions are authentic, divine, and which ones are corrupted and deceiving. Thus, I only follow the Qur'an." Dear friends, today I will discuss these so-called traditions, the Sunnah or Hadith. And towards the end, I will give you an answer as to why the Quran is not enough guidelines for the lives of Muslims. So hang on till the end. Let me first explain and clarify the Arabic Islamic terms concerning this issue. Hadith. These are reports relating to the words and deeds of Muhammad, also something he instructed and what was done in his presence. There are many collections of customs and traditions. As Sunnah, it means custom or the path or the way of the Prophet. It is the way of life of how Muhammad and his followers lived during the 23 years of the ministry of Muhammad in Mecca and Medina. These two terms, Hadith and Sunnah, are often used in the vernacular, closely interrelated as synonymous. Though, of course, there are also different descriptions for each term. When Muhammad lived in Mecca and later in Medina, he was the leader, and if a problem arose, he solved them according to his visions and judgments. Muhammad's followers believed him to be the unique prophet of Allah, and everything he said and did, they perceived as being perfectly right. However, it also has to be said that some Meccan people also became a little bit critical, since they observed that these revelations fitted Muhammad nicely and often served for his personal advantages. Nevertheless, this means that the Muslim community relied solely on Muhammad to solve the problems and give answers to questions they faced in everyday life situation. However, who did the Muslim community consult after Muhammad was dead? In the beginning, after Muhammad was dead, the leaders and companions of Muhammad remembered what Muhammad said and did, and so answers were given. But as time passed, more and more of these companions also died, and the Muslim community sought additional sources to answer their questions. This was the reason why, during the time of the first four caliphs, the Quran was written. Muslims sought answers to their questions in the texts of the Quran. Remember, the Quran was not written during the time of Muhammad, and Muhammad never gave order to write such a book, but it was the caliphs after Muhammad who decided to write the Quran. But as Islam spread to foreign lands and cultures, new questions confronted the Muslims and its community. The Quran often gave no clear answers to these new situations and their problems and questions. Thus, the Ummah needed additional references to clarify the issues not treated in the Quran. Because Muslims were sure that their Prophet's way of life and the actions of his contemporaries, of which he approved, were perfect role models. They were convinced that the way of life of Muhammad was to be imitated as closely as possible in order to please Allah and thus gain a greater chance for entry into paradise after death. Since most of these life stories are from Muhammad, were not found in the Qur'an and had not been collected and written down yet, some specific Islamic scholars found it necessary to do so. Thus, to preserve the knowledge of Muhammad's way of life, scholars started to collect and write down the sayings and events of his life that were not included in the Quran. These mostly orally transmitted anecdotes and incidents are known in English as traditions and may be subdivided into Hadith, saying stories, and Sunnah, custom habit. As I said earlier, these two terms, Hadith and Sunnah, are often used closely interrelated or used as synonymous. The collection and writing down of these traditions happened only about 200 to 300 years after Muhammad's death. Some Muslim scholars began to collect and write them down in special books. The most famous Muslim scholar was Al-Bukhari. He died in 870 AD. He collected about 600,000 traditions of the deeds and sayings of Muhammad, of which, after examination, he considered on his own judgment and examination only about 7,200 as being authentic. Another famous Muslim collector of hadith is called Muslim ibn al-Hajjiyah. He died in 875 AD. Since a good number of these stories of hadith are very questionable, critics today doubt even this. To compensate for this, Muslim researchers have tried to incorporate them into categories such as healthy, beautiful, or weak. The collectors differentiated three categories of Sunnah concerning the actions of Muhammad. First, the action by Muhammad himself. Secondly, actions that a group of Muslims performed in the presence of Muhammad and he approved of it. Thirdly, actions that were performed by a third party of people in Muhammad's presence and which he approved. Usually, Muslim scholars had the following criteria for acceptance as authentic traditions. A story concerning the lifestyle of Muhammad. First, the chain of narrators had to be complete, consisting only of men. Secondly, each narrator in the chain had to be accepted as a reliable and trustworthy person. Thirdly, the content of the text had to be attested in several places and should not contradict other authoritative traditions. Next, I like to mention some important topics that are attended in the Hadith. I like to name the following. For instance, on religious matters such as prayer, pilgrimage, fasting, holy war, predestination. And on family life, such as inheritance, marriage, and divorce. But also economic matters such as contracts, commerce, and banking. And also about personal hygiene, such as cleanliness, shaving, use of perfume, brushing one's teeth. There are some problems concerning the collections of the Sunnah and Hadith. We can name the following. The stories were handed down over many years and through many generations. How could the collectors be sure which stories were correct or falsified or changed? The different scholars accepted and classified stories as correct, but they could no longer ask Muhammad for his authority. Different interpretations and the use of the Hadith and Sunnah cause disagreements between the different Muslim groups and lead to conflicts and tensions. There are major differences, especially between the Sunni and Shia Muslims. They also have their own trusted scholars and reject the scholars of the other group as not being authoritative. Please consult concerning this issue my book Ask Your Muslim Friend in section 1.3.4. During my meetings with Muslim people, I often heard how they quote and use this Sunnah and Hadith. Many Muslims are unsure when quoting a story if it is written in the Qur'an or the Hadith books. But most Muslims make no difference whether it might be in the Qur'an or the books of Hadith. Thus, they place the Hadith books on the same level of authority as the Qur'an without realizing this. A Muslim quoting a certain Hadith story to me said, "This was absolutely true and perfect." He went on to give a certain and reason that Bukhari was a perfect man and he made 100% true decisions by choosing this story being true, which he judged to be absolutely trustworthy. However, this means that he portrays Bukhari as a perfect man, something Bukhari himself never claimed to be. In addition, by doing this, Muslims put Bukhari on the same level as Muhammad and even Allah. Thus, it appears that such Muslims commit idolatry without realizing it. It is called shirk, which is associating a person with Allah. In my book, Ask Your Muslim Friend, in section 1.3.3, I give 9 examples of different hadith on various themes. In these examples, I give the references and some explanation. So I return to my initial story of the Muslim who claims that the Quran is enough to follow. In his opinion, there is no need for the provided reasons to follow the Hadith and the Sunnah. Even some Muslim leaders today make the same claims. Listen to this Islamic scholar from the Kalam Institute.
How do we know exactly that we have to obey him and that we have to follow him? The follow-up question naturally is going to be, well, these hadith and these sunnah that we talk about, how do we know which one are authentic, which one are good, which one are weak, which one are fabricated? How are the hadith even collected and compiled? I heard so many different ideas and rumors about this. How do I know what is legitimate?
Norman Ali Khan from Quran Weekly emphatically claims the Quran is enough.
أولم يكفيهم أنا أنزلنا عليك الكتاب يتلى عليهم. Isn't it enough for them that we sent the book down onto them?
Dear friends, what do you think? Is the Quran sufficient, or do Muslims also need to follow the teachings of the Sunnah and Hadith? Let me know what you think and write your thoughts in the comments. If you want to know more about this topic, you will find more in-depth information in my book, Ask Your Muslim Friend, in section 1.3. You can download a free copy on our website. Please don't forget to hit the like button. And if you like to receive regular talks on similar topics, subscribe to our channel. Write your questions in the comment section and I will happily answer each of them. See you again soon. Good day and God bless you.